On the same day that the Supreme Court shut down the criminal appeal of Ghislaine Maxwell, the Supreme Court also pulled the plug on a different appeal in a criminal case that Donald Trump has a great interest in. It's a case of Turkey's state-run Halkbank. And you might not be familiar with it. It barely got any attention, but it traces to a scandal that dogged Trump during his first term. And here's why you should care about it. I'm Adam Klasfeld. You're watching All Rise News here on Legal AF, which is part of the Midas Touch Network. Take a moment right now to hit subscribe to make sure that you watch videos like these, where you find news where you might not find it other places. Now, this particular story, the case of Turkey's state-run Halkbank, is part of a scandal that got some attention, but not much, during Trump's first term, and it goes to U.S.-Turkish relationships, and in particular, Trump's relationship with Turkey's strongman ruler, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The first time that Trump announced that he was going to campaign for a president in 2016, he went on the show of Steve Bannon, and when asked about a subject close to U.S.-Turkish relations, this was Trump's response.
Your plan in prosecuting this war as commander-in-chief of the United States, if you're elected president, in prosecuting the war, what do you do with Turkey? Is Turkey a reliable partner? I know they're a NATO ally. Are they a reliable partner?
Well, I have a little conflict of interest because I have a major building in Istanbul, and it's a tremendously successful job. It's called Trump Towers, 2 towers instead of 1. Not the usual 1, it's 2. And I've gotten to know Turkey very well, and they're amazing people. They're incredible people.
So Trump, on Steve Bannon's show, boasts about his conflict of interest in Turkey because of his real estate, the Trump Towers Istanbul. As a matter of fact, here's a picture of Erdogan at the ribbon cutting of Trump Towers Istanbul. And throughout Trump's first term, Trump took a great interest in the case of, first, the case of gold trader Reza Zarrab, the mastermind of this money laundering conspiracy that has embarrassed Erdogan and the Turkish state, and the case of Turkey's state-run Halkbank that grew out of that. Now, Reza Zarrab was a gold trader who put together this conspiracy by funneling money from the Iranian government, and oil money in particular, into Turkey's state-run bank, buying gold that would be couriered across international borders, melted down, and sold onto international markets. He pleaded guilty to those crimes. But before he pleaded guilty, he had an attorney named Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York City turned Trump surrogate. And nobody knew at the time why Reza Zarrab was suddenly being represented by Rudy Giuliani. Lo and behold, it turns out that Rudy Giuliani wasn't there to argue in court. What he was doing was engaging what was described as shadow diplomacy. He traveled to Turkey's capital of Ankara, and he traveled to the White House for an infamous Oval Office meeting with then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who said that during that meeting, Trump and Giuliani urged him to try to arrange a prisoner swap that would have freed Zarrab and killed this case. And small wonder, this case electrified the people of Turkey because it showed a corruption scandal dating from 2013, beginning of Erdogan starting to amass power and go after opposition. It's a case that people who are journalists had been prosecuted for in Turkey for covering this case. Trump tried to make this case go away, and so did Giuliani. That effort failed in his first term. Reza Zarrab turned state's witness, pleaded guilty, and delivered damning testimony against a Halkbank official, Hakan Atilla. And during that testimony, implicated Erdogan directly in sanctions-busting trades, that is, trades that violated U.S. sanctions. It was blockbuster testimony. The manager of Halkbank was convicted, and then a U.S. attorney brought the case against Halkbank. Now, it should be noted, before this case went to trial, the U.S. attorney who brought the case against Reza Zarrab, Preet Bharara, was fired for unexplained reasons. And there had been some suspicion that his bringing that case contributed to his firing. And one of Preet Bharara's successors, Jeffrey Berman, former U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman, pursued the case against Halkbank, and he was suddenly fired by Trump's former Attorney General, Bill Barr, in an extraordinary weekend standoff. And Jeffrey Berman wrote in his memoirs that he believed he was fired because of the Halkbank case. Now, the case against Halkbank survives, and it survives today in part because every level of the federal judiciary rejected Halkbank's claims of sovereign immunity, saying that essentially, since they are an arm of the Turkish government, they cannot be prosecuted by the US government. They have sovereign immunity. That was a case that was rejected by the trial judge, rejected by the appellate court, and now rejected once again by the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court will not relieve Trump of the burden of having to, for example, pardon Ghislaine Maxwell himself, since she's now reached the end of the road in her appeals. The Supreme Court is not going to vacate her convictions. She has to serve her 20-year sentence, and they are not going to do the release of Ghislaine Maxwell for him. And he, of course, said recently at a press conference that he would consider a pardon, not explaining on what basis he would consider such an application. And because of the Supreme Court's other decision, the case against Halkbank survives in the same court, the Southern District of New York, several years later, where the case is still active. And it's a case where there have been multiple people, a former U.S. attorney, former Secretary of State, former National Security Advisor, all under Trump's first term, saying Trump had a great interest in this case and wanted it gone. It was a ruling that happened the same day, on the same document in which the Supreme Court rejected the petition of Ghislaine Maxwell. It also rejected the petition of Turkey's state-run Halkbank. And it's a case that goes to the corruption of financial markets. It's a multi-billion-dollar conspiracy to violate U.S. sanctions against Iran that was facilitated by Reza Zarrab, the client of Rudy Giuliani, in a case that Trump tried to make disappear. You've been watching All Rise News here on Legal AF on the Midas Touch Network. If you want to find out stories that don't get a lot of popular attention or analysis that goes a little bit deeper beyond what you're used to, visit www.allrisenews.com. That's www.allrisenews.com. You'll get my newsletter if you subscribe and if you become a paid subscriber. I'm a fully independent journalist, and your subscriptions make it possible for me to do the work that I do. If you can't afford a subscription right now, that's okay. Subscribe to these videos if you want to keep watching my work, and thank you for your viewership.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.